Hello, my name is Gabe Streit. I'm one of the reporters here at the Southern Illinois newspaper in Carbondale, Illinois, and I'm here to tell you about my favorite 5 stories of 2019. This year, I had the privilege to work on a lot of exciting and interesting things. I grew up in Southern Illinois, and so I've gotten to learn a lot about a community that I, in some ways, had taken for granted, but always enjoyed. One of the stories that really brought that to light for me was looking into the history of education for migrant workers in Southern Illinois. I've always felt very lucky that we have a strong Latino community here. It's a small one, but we have a lot of Mexican, Guatemalan, Central American people who have brought their, food and language and culture here. And I think it's a great gift for our region. One of the things I think people didn't realize, and I definitely didn't, is that a lot of the permanence of that community here can be traced to investments that we made in migrant education. It used to be that all of the Latino population of Southern Illinois were migrant farm workers who came here to work in our peach and apple fields. And their kids had some of the worst educational outcomes of any kids in the country. This was 40 or 50 years ago. That the state started looking at ways to tackle that and ended up making big investments in summer schools that did ESL and other sort of remedial education for kids who moved across schools as their parents followed growing seasons around the country. And one of the interesting consequences of that is that it's actually led to a lot of people deciding to stick around Southern Illinois. I also took a look at our recycling challenges, reflecting the challenges that are happening around the country as China decides that it no longer wants to buy all our trash, which is kind of understandable. But the global recycling downturn in Southern Illinois has just totally changed what you can and cannot recycle. And I think that one of the big problems is people still get that warm, fuzzy feeling when they throw something in the recycling bin like styrofoam that in fact is going to end up in a landfill. So that was kind of one of the missions of the stories. But then also just looking at the way our poor, small, rural communities are pretty much completely dysfunctional when it comes to recycling. The state has established mandates, Illinois asking communities to recycle to certain levels and to hire people to work on recycling, and yet because our counties are scraping by to provide basic police and highway department services, a lot of those benchmarks aren't getting met, and I basically found that no one cares. That was disturbing, but I also felt like pretty valuable for people to learn and talk about. I got to write a really silly story about everyone down here being mad at a local McDonald's because they promised free Big Macs for a year to the first 100 people into a new restaurant in Harrisburg, and then kind of handed out the tickets early because they were afraid that there was going to be a Black Friday stampede at the door. But then all the people who were peacefully waiting outside, a line of hundreds of people still basically formed. And all those people felt totally shortchanged because they were waiting for the Big Mac tickets and they weren't told that other people who had showed up at 3 a.m. had already gotten them. Legitimately important story that I worked on this year was spending a day covering the search for a young developmentally disabled girl who disappeared in Carbondale. Her name was Patrice Dotson. She was a 7-year-old girl, still is. She was found alive, thankfully, so now it has a happy ending. But she disappeared from the block where her house is in downtown Carbondale in June at night on a Monday, and then was gone for 24 hours almost. She was eventually found several miles away in basically a deserted, wooded forest area place. She struggles to communicate on her own, and so people were really, and aside from that, she's 7, people were really worried about this little girl, and it was a day where it was really important for us to be able to keep the public informed of what was going on, because there were folks all throughout town searching for her. And then also when we were finally able to give the good news that she was all right, that was such a beautiful feeling. And then one more that I chose just because it had a lot of interest across the state was the story of a guy named Solomon Muhammad who did 2 long stints in prison in Southern Illinois, grew up here in a small town, went to prison for most of his young adult life, came out and is now an entrepreneur. Has got a couple food service carts around town, and I enjoyed that story, and I thought people did too. One, because of his incredible and inspiring story, but two, just the way that he talks and expresses himself. Getting to talk to someone who's so different from me and has so much wisdom is just like personally rewarding. Aside from being a reporter, it's the kind of thing you leave smiling and still thinking about and tell your friends and family about, and that hopefully has made me a better person in some small way.